for Nigerians to truly have meaningful connectivity, we will need to invest in fiber optic network. There's no other solution to it. And that investment, when we did the calculation, was going to cost the nation about $2 billion. It's not something that a single company will just boldly dive into and mobilize that capital and put it out there. So government decided that we will not opt for a short-term solution to an age-long problem, that Nigeria is well-placed to be blessed with meaningful connectivity. And if we listen to what the World Bank says, if you improve the quality of connectivity in any nation by 10%, you expect to see about 2.5 in Africa, percent growth in GDP is significant. So for the president's agenda, we said the only thing we were going to do on this matter was once and for all to raise the capital to deploy that 90,000 kilometers of fiber optic, which is what we've done. Today I won't touch on it, but what we've done is actually to kick off a program where the government is putting up to 49% of the capital that is required to be able to deploy this project. And we're saying the private sector should bring the other 51%. We don't want government to manage it. We want this network to be managed by the private sector. So we've modeled this after LNG, which means government is going to invest. There will be an independent board. There will be a management team that will be recruited, and the management team will be responsible for the management. We released the high-level design of the network, and the implication is that every state, every local government, and every ward of Nigeria will be covered in the design. So wherever you live, there will be a point of presence for fiber optic network that is close to your home. And what Nigeria is then going to see once we're able to deploy this is that your connectivity will no longer be you using mobile connectivity at home when you should be using proper fiber-based connectivity in your home. When you're on the go, your towers will also now be nearly all fiberized, which means the quality of connectivity you get will be ubiquitous. It also means that smaller ISPs will now be able to offer services directly to people wherever they live. This, we believe, is a project that we can deliver in 3 years. We've been fortunate. I've worked extremely hard on this without any transaction advisor, and I've raised close to $1 billion with the World Bank leading the round. I can see BRD in the room. They're also participating. AFDB is participating. IFC, AFC, all these organizations are participating. And we know that in the next 3 to 4 years, Nigeria will have one of the best affordable, meaningful connectivity solutions in the world.
I think we're diving right into solutions. And, I think that that's really, really great because there's been a lot of talk for so many years. So to see action is really, really exciting. And Fernando, we'll come to you, but I want to talk to Nneka quickly, simply because the minister spoke about financing. So there's been a lot of financial institutions that have been recently creating funds, investing into traditional infrastructure, roads, ports, railway, but we haven't really seen, sort of finance going directly into technology and critical infrastructure. And I know that Citibank really plays a very pivotal role in providing access to markets and really mobilizing capital flows. So what are your thoughts on how can we unlock those capital flows into technology infrastructure and support what the federal government is doing so that we can really ensure long-term sustainability and also assets that stay bankable over 10 to 15 years?
Thank you. So I think the first thing I would say, I'll just start from the basics, which will be, and it's very commendable what is going on. That's really the public infrastructure that is critical to unlock the investment. So it's very commendable what is already going on with regard to the broadband and all. But the first thing I'll kind of say is it's very important to create that enabling environment to attract investors. We mustn't underplay the impact of that. Having basically a very policy clarity, certainty, providing the right conditions for investors. We can't underplay that. Speed, of processing, the regulatory permits, the licensing, kind of the basics Okay, I'm also the president of the American Business Council, and I know the kinds of conversations that we have about things that you're like, I mean, this should be BAU, right? But it's not quite. So the government is very interested in creating an enabling environment, but we need to really buckle down in that regard to attract the investment, unlock capital, both domestic capital and international foreign capital, not just foreign capital. The second thing I'll speak to will be the hyperscalers. We mustn't forget about them. I think the hyperscalers are quite pivotal to the kind of digital transformation that we're talking about. They have, significant firepower, very significant money to invest in all the right things, cybersecurity, infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, fiber, and all that. And we've seen them do that in some countries. So again, we need to, attract them to invest in this digital transformation journey that we're going to, because we can be talking about big money there. I think that's fairly important. The other point, maybe the third point that I would make, maybe it's around the multilateral agencies, especially the donors. I kind of like what has happened with the results-based mechanism, financing mechanism that the World Bank had done with the MinFin, okay, to provide energy access. If we find this, if we elevate the digital, the power of digital to catalyze transformative economic and inclusive growth, I think that's another area that we can look at something like results-based financing, because energy access is one, but digital inclusivity and all that is very, very important. Of course, we mustn't forget about the DFIs. The DFIs are very interested. And we are in a lot of conversations where, especially the European DFIs, some of them are very interested in digital infrastructure. They have, interest in that. They have allocations for that. But it's about what are the right projects that they can embrace with credible sponsors and all of that. We mustn't overlook that. Even the ECAs, right now we're talking to, there's a couple of projects that we're looking at, and they're selling themselves with the ECAs. There's a lot of interest in that regard. And then, of course, the domestic, we need to incentivize the domestic players, right? There's local capital as well. There are the pension funds. You have the infrastructure funds. But really, everybody wants, it to be commercially viable at the end of the day. They want credible sponsors. They want the right conditions for investment. So I think we can crowd in significant capital. What we're looking for is a lot of money. And it's commendable, the efforts that have been made and the progress that has been made, but it's quite a lot of money. And, obviously the government cannot even dent that if they wanted to. So we need to, do what it takes to attract all the players that have an interest. Talking about the hyperscalers, for instance, why not Nigeria? Young, dynamic population, why not? This is a natural home for them. What does it take to bring them? Let's have the conversation. A bit like what happened with oil and gas. How do we incentivize these things? How do we make it happen? And I think I'll pause at this point.
All right, thank you so much. So it sounds like there's actually a lot of capital that is out there. It's just really about creating that enabling environment. And I'm hoping that Fernando can, share a little bit about his experience in Latin America and specifically in Brazil, where they've been able to actually build that really robust ICT infrastructure. And they've done that through a lot of regulatory maturity and also have created frameworks that help create that enabling environment when it comes to tax reforms, public-private partnerships. So can you tell us a little bit, what are the things that contribute to that maturity, and what are the lessons and best practices that we can, sort of adopt when we're on this journey here in Nigeria?
Yeah, absolutely. All protocols duly observed. I'm very glad to be here, and I foster this exchange of and dialogue about best practices in between countries which have so many similarities and so many obstacles that should be surpassed. So in Brazil, the biggest thing was first to have to provide a macroeconomic ecosystem which was stable and predictable, right? Prior to 1994, foreign direct investments in Brazil were basically non-existent because there was hyperinflation, there was massive fluctuations in FX and foreign exchange rates and so on. So the beginning of everything was basically the stabilization of the economy, right? And that set up the ground for everything else. So after that, the government started to think, okay, now that the macro environment is stable, how can we catalyze development of specific industries and critical strategic, sectors in our economy? And telecommunications was one of them back in the early 2000s. So there was a massive privatization effort done by the government, and there was a massive universal approach to telecommunications. I would like to reinforce this word, universal approach to telecommunications, because that's in the core of everything Brazil is doing in order to provide accessibility and inclusion towards ICT investments. How was this done afterwards? The government decided to establish a very strong national regulatory agency, Anatel, and in a very strong collaboration with the private sector and all other institutions in the country. So basically, this collaboration was driving very long-term policies, clear regulations that helped to create this stable investment environment in Brazil. Yeah, because these regulations were previously discussed with the private sector, with banks, with the whole ecosystems in order for them to be collegiated. And after these were collegiated, that fostered a lot of movement in between private and public partnerships, which is also a core instrument of Brazil's success at this moment. Almost every infrastructure big project in Brazil nowadays is run through a PPP, a private-public partnership. It has not been easy. It was a challenge in the beginning because there were observations about the necessary level of governance, about the money being used, how the money is being utilized, the projected rate of returns, and the role of the government and the role of the private entities. But after this governance was established, after credibility was deployed based on the financial returns of these investments, PPPs started to flourish towards highways, ports construction, power plants, airports, and now for our industry, very importantly, for telecommunications. So now Brazil is thriving on these ecosystems of private-public partnerships, which was enabled, again, by this very clear regulatory framework and also by this very clear long-term strategy towards stability in the government. Another thing which we see happening in Brazil is that since the ecosystem is now rightly established, Brazil is now preparing itself for the next wave of investments. And very importantly, Brazil has defined IFC, digitalization and inclusion as a mission-critical industry and sector. That's very important. It's not any longer seen as a sunk cost or as a public utility. It's now really seen as something which is as vital for Brazil as building roads, as building airports, as building core infrastructure. Because Brazil does not believe that through industrialization, further industrialization, and agriculture and so on by itself, it will reach the next growth frontier. To the Brazilian government, it is clear that IST, digitalization, IoT, 5G, connectivity, broadband connectivity, inclusion will be one of the biggest next growth frontier So I encourage Nigeria to think along the same lines because it can be very costly to miss out this opportunity. And this is something which is being heavily discussed, with the Brazilian government at this moment. Tax simplification, that's also very important. If the business needs, and the investors need clarity, tax have to be simplified. So Brazil is undergoing a massive tax reform. We have close to 42 different taxes at this moment. It's the second most more complex tax country in the world. And after next year, this will be simplified with 2 taxes only. So from 42 to 2 taxes only, right? Over a period of time of 10 years for companies adapting. So all of this brings clarity, and for us projecting results, for us projecting CapEx and returns of investment, this ecosystem is exactly what we need in order for our business to thrive. Some specific cases that I can quickly show here. Anatel has been extremely smart in structuring spectrum auctions, for instance. What they have done is that in the 3G auctions, it was purely a fundraising exercise for the government. So we release you spectrum from 20 years, we keep the money and we invest. What that generated was basically excess investment and burden on the private sector, the non-coverage of rural areas and agro areas, because companies were focusing on the most important centers. And we all saw that that was the wrong direction. So now in the 5G auction, 85% of the proceeds were paid not to the government as fundraising to the government, but as investment commitment to provide coverage to remote areas, rural areas, all specific cities that needed to be covered, by 5G, in alignment with Anatel, in alignment with the Ministry of Communications, based on this broad strategic plan. And the rest of the 15% of the money paid for the licenses, that was paid to the government, but the government immediately allocated the majority of it for universalization funds, for technology innovation and for universalization of services. So there are a couple of billion of dollars available at this moment in Brazil for those 2 purposes coming from this new setup. In terms of another approach which is very important for this huge penetration of broadband in Brazil, which is much higher, it's like double it's in comparison to Nigeria at this moment, is that the Brazilian government and Anatel, they fully embraced the sharing of networks, the sharing of towers, the sharing of data centers, the sharing of fiber. And that's why we exist as I-Systems. 4 years ago, most companies were building their own infrastructure and their backbones and the backhauls and everything else. So that led to excess capacity and that led to a very low take-up rate. So we said, well, let's deploy this infrastructure ourselves. Let's make it neutral, agnostic, with very good KPIs and SLAs. And let's decrease the total cost of ownership and let's accelerate the go-to-market for companies willing to provide services in Brazil. So from 1 customer, we have nowadays 42 customers using our networks and growing every day. So the government has observed that the over-delivery of towers, by all MNOs in Brazil was a mistake, as did the business also understood this way. So neutral tower companies are fundamental for Brazil in this moment in order for this penetration to continue to grow, as neutral fiber companies are becoming fundamental as well. The next frontier is, okay, now that 5G is there, IoT will come, artificial intelligence will come, more capacity on data centers is necessary. So both the Brazilian government and IHS, we ourselves, we are thinking about these solutions already. You know, how the government has reduced taxes in a program called Redata for data centers from 58% to 20% for a specific period of time until it gains scale. What this is generating is a $200 million investment immediately in data centers in Brazil. And if you think that 40% of all Brazilian data is hosted overseas, imagine the sheer benefit this may bring to Brazil in terms of economics and sovereignty over this data. So all of those things put together have deployed a very stable environment for investment in Brazil. And I think most of these initiatives can and shall be emulated by the Nigerian government, which is already acting in the right direction with very coherent reforms, consistent policies, and treating, ICT as not as a sunk cost, but also as a strategic, either a strategic, investment, a crucial investment as vital as roads and highways and so on.
Thank you very much, Fernando, for sharing. Listening to you, I was really excited. Excited because I can see that we're on the right track, right? So you talked about stabilizing the economy. I think the government has done a lot to actually get there. It was a little volatile, but I think we're on the right track to actually have that stability. And Mo mentioned as well in his keynote, to that stability is really, really critical. I was also excited that, you said the government needs to decide and they need to focus and have that will. And then the Honorable Minister has already confirmed to us that the government doesn't only have the will, but they're already executing very, very strategically and very quickly on, some of the things that you've mentioned. So we may be a little behind now, but, Niger no de carry last. So that means that Nigerians don't come last, right? So we always try and go to the top. And I think when you look at, sort of what has happened in the startup ecosystem and what has happened with fintechs in Nigeria, it has really shown that we have the ability to leapfrog when we put our mind to it and when both government and private sector are collaborating and working together. And with that, I want to sort of shift gears from infrastructure to innovation and go to E. And, this poster child for innovation, startups, and really technology acceleration and adoption. And, with the work that you're doing in Future Africa, what have you seen? Sort of Mo mentioned, sort of agriculture and agri-tech being another really big enabler for socioeconomic development. So what have you seen in that agri-tech startup space? How can digital platforms and specifically artificial intelligence really integrate into smallholder farmers and make sure that they're integrated into the value chains, that they can, have access to finance, as well as access to extension programs that help them to adopt new practices, right? And really just use technology for what they're already doing to make them more efficient. What are the things that, you think we can do as a nation to really accelerate that development in that space so that agri-tech can become the new fintech?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to stand on existing protocol. And like you, I very much think we're already on the right track. And with your permission, I'd like to take it a little bit broader than just agri-tech, because there's a tendency for us to think about innovation in silos, which tends to not really work very well. And to illustrate my point, again, with a lot of what the Honorable Minister has said, I want to take cast our minds back to now 12 years ago, right? 2012. I was a recent returnee from the University of Waterloo, and I used to spend quite a bit of time at CC Hub, where the Honorable Minister was our leader, and during that time, I was
I very much saw what fiber did to that community where I still live till this day. Main One at the time was one of the first companies, and there are many faces from those journeys at Main One, to pipe fiber through Yaba because there was free right of way. And that one action, together with the right leadership in that community, blossomed into all the successes you're talking about today. Since that time till now, $10 billion has poured into the technology ecosystem, the vast majority of it in Lagos and within that circumference in Yaba. So when we're talking about the kind of impact that some of the bold vision of the Honorable Minister and some of the players in this room are making, it is not because we need to look to Brazil necessarily to find the examples. It is because we've done it before here, and we just need to start thinking about how every ward in Nigeria can have the same story that Yaba did. Now, does that mean that it's going to be fintech? Maybe not, right? But what it means is that when in Otupo, somebody can access the internet for next to nothing, it is now possible for innovators to go there and provide climate finance, right? It is now possible for an innovator to go there and provide agricultural extension services to farmers on their phone using their local languages because of AI. It is now possible for us to have much smoother logistics so that people can actually move perishable items to the right storage facilities so that ultimately we can lower the wastage, which is actually the biggest problem we have. It now means that as an economy, we can be more productive as a whole, which is the entire point of innovation. Innovation is not for show. It is not to carry a label. It is not because we wear fancy backpacks, shirts, and jeans. It is because, quite literally, innovation gives our people the wings to be more productive. And with that productivity comes increased earnings. With that increased earnings comes increased GDP, increased consumption, increased taxation, right, for government revenue. It means more of our children go to school. It means less dependence on foreign aid, right? So we have to think about these things as bigger. I know the smallholder farmer narrative is one that the development community has sold to us, but we have to now be frank about the reality that no economy can be built on smallholder farmers. We need educated talent to come in and invest at scale. That becomes possible when we have the productivity drivers, things like technology, things like talent, things like infrastructure, like fiber and edge computing and energy, easier to deliver at the last mile. And that creates the opportunities, just like it did in Yaba. So I want us to be thinking much bigger, much broader than, what can we do for smallholder? It would be such a waste of this opportunity and this technology if we just think that small. We need to be thinking, how much more food can we produce? How much more food can we avoid wastage of? How much more money can we make? How much bigger, how many more markets can we dominate if we're able to provide this? And one thing I'll say is that the Honorable Minister has provided a fantastic example, as he always does, with the agricultural activities that he himself has undertaken as a public servant. And you're already starting to see what is possible, right, in that respect. I'll say one more thing. For me, the challenge with innovation in Nigeria is that we always think too small. And I say this very wistfully because I think back to 10 years ago. And, right now, everything that we've done over that last 10 years, we have an opportunity now to do at a scale we would have never imagined we could in 10 years. And that's the scale at which Nigeria must be thinking about innovation. It is not enough for us to just have a Yaba success story with a $10 billion tag. We need to be thinking of a nationwide success story. Maybe we should be talking about a $1 trillion technology industry, right, that can drive productivity and innovation around the country in real things, right, in agriculture, in security, right? We're a country where we should not, security is one of the biggest challenges agriculture has. Technology can't solve security, right? In storage and processing of food for our people to eat, a country like Nigeria should not be paying the prices we pay for food. It is just unconscionable. So when we think about innovation at Future Africa, it's underpinned by two key things. The first thing is an understanding that our challenges are real, right? We are not bleary-eyed about that, but it's also an acceptance of the reality that our challenges are also incredible opportunities. And that's how we innovate. We fund innovations that take our biggest challenges and turn them to much larger opportunities.
Amazing. And I love the notion of, thinking bigger than we could have ever imagined. And I think that just looking at the different initiatives that, the federal government is putting into place, whether it is the coastal highway or it is the, Honorable Minister's 3 million technical talent program, I think we've started thinking bigger than before. Perhaps we can think even bigger, but I think it's important to just celebrate the success that we've created so far. So the 3MTT program, Honorable Minister Tijani, that you created has trained over 300,000 Nigerian youth so far. The aim is 3 million in 3 years, I believe. So we're 10% there. And I'm sure that just having that pilot and seeing that it is possible will allow to, sort of really accelerate that. So I'd like you to just share a little bit more about what does the next phase of 3MTT look like? And how do you make sure that those skills also translate into jobs that then can sort of support all the things that we've talked about today, support the innovation and growing that innovation and accelerating that innovation that E talked about? And how do we also make sure that that workforce that you're creating is AI ready? Mohammed said that you don't really know, is AI taking jobs or it's replacing jobs or it's creating new jobs? We're not too sure yet, right? But we're seeing big companies like Microsoft laying off 9,000 people, Accenture exited 11,000 people. So those are scary numbers for a nation that has a lot of unemployed youth. So just share with us, please.
Thank you so much, Nkem. I think you also helped with simplifying my work with the framing, which is, to be honest, I think going around the world as a minister, I see how blessed Nigeria is as a nation, at this time. I think we have a president that is pro-business, very strong, clear understanding of the role of business. But I think at the same time, also very, very clear understanding of the role of government. And I'm beginning to learn, and this is my attempt to recruit more people to believe in this, that government is almost like a father or a mother, that sometimes you provide environment for your kids that they don't think they need, right? Most of the time. I think historically, we always believe that the only wisdom to fixing Nigeria can only come from the private sector. That's extremely imbalanced. Because what I'm saying, when I came into government, I started looking at back to connectivity before I talk about talent. And a lot of people were showing me what they call the nighttime satellite data, which is literally in my sector, like the best data sets you can use to determine where you invest. Then it got topped when I traveled to the Bay Area, and a gentleman from a large technology company that I won't mention also was waxing lyrical about this nighttime satellite data and how it helps to determine where they put investment in connectivity in a lot of African countries. And I got extremely disturbed because a lot of what E was talking about will be impossible if you use nighttime satellite data for investment. Because what it's simply looking for is where are people living, and that's where we're going to put investment in digital infrastructure. And for any nation in 2025 that wants to grow, if your notion of connectivity is still based on connecting people to people, you have failed. That is what businesses should do, because that's what they understand as where their money will come from. But for a country, you should never attempt that, because you will never be able to meet the innovation you're looking for in agriculture. I was in Brazil a few weeks ago, and I went on a farm that was already doing between 10 to 12 tons of maize per hectare. The average in Nigeria is 2.5 tons per hectare, right? And this farm was not doing this because of GMO. It was simply connectivity. The farm was so far away that there was no other way but for us to use a small plane to get onto the farm. The farm has 4 landing strips. That's how remote it was. You have to fly into the farm. Yet there was connectivity. When Fernando was talking about universal in connectivity, what it means is that you understand that every part of your nation must be connected. You don't have, it's not a choice. I discovered a few weeks ago as well that China has over 4 million 5G towers. 4 million 5G towers. So the government was just deciding we must be connected, and they were investing in it. If you don't get the understanding of the analogy I made on maize, right, the implication is that it doesn't make sense for Nigeria to grow maize because it will be cheaper to import from Brazil. And you know what? I validated that on Saturday. I went to a feed mill in Ogun State, and all the maize I saw in there were from Argentina and Brazil. I'm a farmer as well. I have thousands of bags of maize in my farm. I have to compete with farmers from Brazil and Argentina who are way more cheaper. My own farm is already doing 3.5 per hectare, which is better than national average. But Brazil, importing from Brazil is way cheaper, which means if I'm not careful, I have to shut down my farm, and about 100 people working on the farm will be jobless. You get the implication of this. So governments should popularize that thinking. We don't need to wait for people who sell data as their source of income to tell the entire country what connectivity means, because you're not going to get it right. If you work in mining today, the best mines in the world are connected to internet. Otherwise, they're not going to be efficient. So your mining can't be efficient. Your agriculture can't be efficient. I was just speaking to one of the board members of NCC this afternoon before coming here that was talking to me about folks in Riverine area where teachers are unwilling to go there to go and teach. So you can't teach all those kids if they're not connected, because if they're connected, teachers can teach them remotely. You can teach them. So the implication is that the $1 trillion economy that we want to achieve, we have strong understanding that every part of Nigeria must be connected. We cannot secure this country without connectivity. Can you see the agenda? So the agenda for government on connectivity is different from the agenda for people who sell and make money from just basic connectivity. And it's the same for talent. If we put in all this investment, it's not going to be sufficient. If we don't dream big, there's absolutely not going to be any way in which we can translate our investments in technology into real economic impact. So we're going to need significant amounts of young people who are talented to actually help us build the future. And I've seen that at CCO. I've seen it through in Yolua. You know, folks who actually understand technology came back into this country, built, but you know what we're not talking about? After COVID, most of them got taken away to the countries that are now complaining about immigration, right? They took all of them away because they didn't have the talent to power their technology ecosystem. That was why when the president said we must create 1 million technical jobs, we said we're going to train 3 million. Not only because we know they will steal our people. So we want to train enough so that when they take some, we have some left. That Nigeria can actually become a net exporter of talent as well. And I think this is the thinking. You touch on artificial intelligence. When I became minister, I said we must do AI. You know, a lot of people were complaining that, you know, people are poor. Why are you focusing on AI? The reality is that AI is what's going to determine the most effective farms, for instance. So if you're saying you're not going to do AI, wait until Brazil starts to layer more artificial intelligence. There will not be any industry that will be competitive locally. And we can't wake up overnight and say, now we're ready in 10 years' time. Now we're ready, so let's do it. It doesn't work like that. That's why we've invested in ensuring that 4% of those 3 million people are focused on artificial intelligence. That's why Nigeria today at UNGA in New York, we launched the first government-backed large language model in Africa. That's something we now have, where folks who are building artificial intelligence can now use our large language model to train and build a solution so that that solution can speak to the farmer in my village or somewhere in San Fran. Because until we're able to do that, AI will not work for us. And if AI cannot work for us, there's literally no future for us in Nigeria. So this is the thinking. And this is a pitch. I know you're clapping for me. This is a pitch. I truly want NESG. I want the smartest people in the room to try and understand what the government is doing. And it's not about whether what government is doing is perfect. It can only become perfect when smart people digest, understand, and contribute to making it better. Do not make the assumption. I know we make this assumption, and this is probably not the best platform to talk about it. Remember what happened to BlackBerry? They kept on in Africa until when they were dead elsewhere. Don't make the assumption that only the private sector will shape the path to how we use technology. It's never, never. There's no country or continent where that's been the case. Government will pull in, private sector will pull in, the civil society will pull, the think tanks will pull in, because we do not have the time to waste. Nigeria is not the kind of country where we can say ubiquitous connectivity should happen in 10 years' time. We don't have to do it as governments. If we don't do this 90,000 kilometers, the private sector will do it. But what will happen is that it won't be completed in 20 years' time. And it will be too late. So this is why people should actually pay attention to what this government is doing, because I think we're on a trajectory to a place where development is actually possible. But we need more people understanding what we're doing, more people also contributing to it, and know that this is a government that is pro-business. You know, nobody is talking about it. The sector that I regulate is one of the biggest beneficiary of all the reforms in this government. Check the numbers. Most companies in the sector are now declaring significant bumper profit. Not only because we allow tariff increase, everything that we've been asked to do, government is done. Of course, you can talk about implementation and ensuring that we implement these things to deliver results, but there's no better time to be in Nigeria ICT sector than today. Thank you, Nkem.
Thank you so much. So what I'm hearing is we need to collaborate, we need to build partnerships, we need to bring financing to the table, and we need to do it fast, faster than we've ever done it before. And unfortunately, time also went really, really fast, and we have no time left. So I just want to give the panelists, the chance to, in one sentence, tell me or tell us here, if you could champion one bold, practical intervention to guarantee Nigeria's digital leap by 2030, and that's 5 years from now, right? What would it be? E, we'll start from you and just come this way.
Fantastic. So when China, more than 50 years ago, decided that they needed to make a giant leap, the first thing they did was they set up Shenzhen and Shanghai and engineered Hong Kong to become drivers of growth for them, so they could quickly experiment without the cumbersome collective decision-making process that the political system required. We're in exactly the same position in Nigeria with the digital economy. Honorable Minister, we've been championing digital economy bill, which has gone incredibly fast, but not fast enough. And I think that one of the things that we're trying to do with the minister's support has been to build this concept of digital economic zones, where very rapid prototyping of policy and implementation can happen, so we can accelerate progress in digital economy. Because there is a lot of potential for us to not just accelerate productivity for ourselves, but also to leverage that talent, productivity, and infrastructure to scale our trade in our digital trade with the world, whether it's in the area of talent through AI-powered business process outsourcing, whether it's in the area of real-world assets and blockchain, which we have world-class regulation for through this Securities and Exchange Commission, whether it's in the area of open banking, whether it's in the area of agriculture, and and commodity trading. So for me, we really need to get our digital special economic zone laws together. First, so we can bring our champions back home. We've got 5 out of Africa's 9 unicorns, but none of them are domiciled in Nigeria. We want to bring those companies back home. But to do so, we need rapid and environment special economic zones where we can rapidly prototype that policy and enable more innovation, policy innovation, and platforms to be built. Thank you.
So much. Fernando?
Yeah, in my view, it's very important not to miss this IST opportunity now. As we mentioned before, it can be very costly if not done so. And for Nigeria to achieve this goal of $1 trillion economy, very soon, this is going to be pivotal. This can be pivotal, to have this universal approach to IST. I think the basis for it is already laid out with the current stability of FX and the reforms which the government are going. So I encourage to continue with the reforms. Consistency is key concerning regulatory clarity and the reforms. And given the environment which is now being deployed to Nigeria, foreign direct investment through IFCs, through development banks, through local institutions, hereby represented as well, will come. Money looks for good projections, stability, clarity of purpose, and collaboration. So I'm pretty sure that as Brazil did, as Indonesia did, as so many other countries have done, and China, including China, Nigeria is very well positioned to do the same thing. And if you can finalize by fostering further collaboration in between our countries, in between the regulatory agencies, in between the Ministry of Communications, in between financial institutions and national development banks and so on, we understand IHS can help to facilitate that for this exchange of information and best practice knowledge to continue to occur.
Very much. Honorable Minister?
Thank you so much. Let me keep it short. I think for me, considering the level of creativity that we have in our country, I have no doubt that Nigeria's digital economy will continue to be strong. However, I think that we will need to be extremely intentional with what we do with that creativity and all the opportunities that we've seen. The progress we've seen in fintech today is as a result of people being intentional to build interoperability in the financial services space. It's people talk about innovation. It's actually less about innovation, but more about the fact that the platform was there for innovators to innovate. So I'll use this opportunity to also announce that our ministry would like to popularize great ideas. We think society becomes stronger when good ideas are all over the place, which is why I think for the first time, the ministry is preparing a 21 billion naira digital economy research scheme that literally will fund organizations like NESD, academic institutions, folks who will do practical academic research with evidence in connectivity, in digital skills and literacy, in digital public infrastructure, in things around online protection, cybersecurity, and trust. And my hope in that is that in the next 5 years, this scheme can become one of the most well-funded research scheme on the African continent, because I think what we need more of is fantastic ideas to help us generate more forward-looking policies that can help take us to where we need to be.
That sounds really exciting, and I'm sure a lot of people will key into that fund once it's officially announced and we know how to do that. Nneka, you have the closing and final words here.
The last but not the least.
Definitely not the least.
Yeah, I think I would say that, one of the first things, and I'll just digress for a second, one of the first things I say to investors is that we have a very pro-business government with all the right intentions. I say this like all the time. We have pro-business people in charge and all that. But I think it's important to match that intention with execution outcomes sometimes. I think it's very, very critical, because I talk to investors, domestic and the ones who are trying to come in, and there's some disconnect sometimes with the actual outcomes, how long it takes, certainty around how long things take, around the regulatory regime and things like that. I will prioritize that because there is capital for sure. We can't go it alone, domestic and foreign capital. And to attract them, we need to have a compelling value proposition. Okay, it's about attractiveness. We already have some good pillars, but we need to make sure that the money is coming here and not going somewhere else. So I'll prioritize that enabling environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I promised you that we would have practical solutions, and I think we have delivered as a panel. So thank you very much to everyone that has stayed here through the afternoon to listen to this amazing panel. Thank you for the panelists for sharing their knowledge and sharing so passionately and also so generously. Once again, my name is Nkem Dilimuajibel, and we'll call it a day for now. Thank you very much.